That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't, could we get away with airplane today or top secret today? I just don't know if, I mean, I think audiences would like it as much, but I think back then it was, there was more freedom.
If you were lucky enough to grow up in the 90s or earlier, then surely you know our guest this week. Meet Jim Abrahams.
And don't call me Shirley.
No one will know what is about to happen. And once again, Germany will become united under one rule, ours. After Sunday, there will be no one to stop us.
The explosion claimed the lives of the owner of the development.
Cheat surfing! If everybody had a 12 gauge and a surfboard too, you see
Johnny, what do you make out of this?
This? Well, I could make a cap, or a brooch, a pterodactyl.
Totally bitchin', riding waves to blast their pigeons, and it's so neat shooting ski while you're riding on the heavies all day. First wave, don't get tired. Second wave, aim higher. Third wave, pull and fire. We're waxing down our surf.
Jim Abrams made some of the most successful film comedies of the 1980s.
Okay, let's print that. We'll do one more like that.
His movies include Airplane, Naked Gun, and Hot Shots.
When the surf and the flat get heavy, and we'll have fun with our guns till our lifeguard takes our ammo away. First wave, don't get us tired.
So Jerry and David Zucker, dad and my dad were business partners in Milwaukee. So we grew up knowing each other. We didn't live very far apart, and I'm older than them. I'm 3 years older than David and 6 years older than Jerry. So we didn't hang out together when we were kids, but we certainly knew each other and had fun together, and our families got together all the time. So we knew each other from forever. But then years go by, and after college, I had a job in Milwaukee as a private investigator, and David was a construction expediter, and Jerry was still finishing college. And I ran into David one day, and he said, we kind of caught up with each other, and he said, I've got this stuff called videotape equipment at my house. Exactly. Do you want to get together and we can mess around with it? And so I said, sure. So I went over to Dave and Jerry's house, and Jerry was home from college, and we just turned on, it was this old reel-to-reel, I think half-inch videotape recorder with a big, box and a big heavy camera. But we just started playing around with it and videoing things that made us laugh. And it was really fun. So we would do stuff like spoofs. What was the Love Story was a very popular movie back then. There I see one nod. You guys are probably too young to remember a Love Story.
I remember it.
Oh yeah. And there's a scene in it where the girl, I forget who the actress was. She's in the hospital dying, and her boyfriend Ryan O'Neal comes to visit her, And so we did a spoof of that. And she says to him while he's in the hospital, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I got this kink in the back of my neck." And, that made us laugh. He was whining about the kink in his neck, and there she was, sick in the hospital and stuff. So,
was it Ally McGraw?
Ally McGraw, good call. Good call, yeah. And so we would do stuff, or, whatever the local commercials were, or, we did a spoof of a commercial where the guy is a shaving commercial, and he nicks himself, but really cuts his face up, and just stuff like that, just literally to make ourselves laugh. And but it was fun, and so we started to show the stuff to our friends and family, and they laughed. So we found Jerry was still we all went to the University of Wisconsin. Jerry was still there. And so we found in the back of a bookstore a room that was vacant and we could rent. And so we set up our videos, taped stuff on monitors, and opened a little theater, and showed our stuff. And in addition, we did some improvisation skits. And it was very crude in every sense of the word. But people came and they laughed, and we really had fun doing it. It was called Kentucky Fried Theater.
Yes.
We ran it in Madison, right, for about a year. Just on the weekends. I still had a job in Milwaukee, and I'd go up to Madison on the weekends. It's about 70 miles, and we did the theater.
Wow.
And then come back, and it was a ball, and we loved it. And so we thought another skit that we did in the theater, which wound up in the first movie we worked on, which is called Kentucky Fried Movie. There was a skit where a boy and a girl are watching a monitor. They're watching a news broadcast, and then they start to make out in front of the news broadcaster, and the news broadcaster notices what they're doing and reacts to them making out, and that wound up being a little more elaborate than Kentucky Fried Movie. But those are the kind of things that we did on stage. And after a while, at first not many people came, but after a while it would sell out. And of course, we had the steep ticket price of $1.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
You weren't in it for the money then.
What year was this, if I may ask?
70s?
70.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, by chance, do you have any of the old film?
Oh, that'd be good.
Well, that one is available.
Oh,
yeah. Actually, David.
Like any, especially the really early stuff when you guys were kids.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah. David has always been what we call the keeper of the archives.
Okay.
And he keeps lots of it. Excuse me. And we still Dave and Jerry and I get together all the time.
Good.
We live close by, and we're big Packer fans and whatnot. So we watch Packer games together, and we'll reminisce. And David has a lot of it on still. He had it transferred from the old VHS stuff, so it's still preserved, and every once in a while we'll look at some.
Somebody's going to do a documentary on the evolution of your thing, and then release that. I think that'd be a lot of interest in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, David must have seen that you had a sense of humor. I don't just randomly go up to my friends and say, I have some video equipment. Do you want to go? I mean, he must have seen that you had a sense of humor or something.
Yeah, I guess we all did. I don't know. I mean, we all goofed off a lot in high school, as much as you could back then. There's actually.
I think they still do.
They still do.
Yeah, there's a story we tell in the book about we went to Shorewood High School, and Shorewood High School had the top floor was this big dome ceiling. And so what they did to kind of help the acoustics is they put a big American flag in the dome ceiling to kind of just keep it from echoing when you were in a class there. And one time there was a substitute teacher, and she said, okay, she wasn't sure what went on in this class, and she said, so how do you, what do you do? Or ask for something like that. And one of the kids in the class, not me, but this is anyone could have said this. One of the kids said, well, we start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So in order to do that, we have to lie down on the floor to face the flag. To say everybody in the class lied down, and she did too. So I don't think there was anything unusually funny about Dave and Jerry and me. It's just all the other kids found good jobs. And without anything else to do.
You had nothing better to do, huh?
Yeah, right.
That's funny.
Around.
How'd you get from Kentucky Fried Theater, which is in Madison, right, all the way to Los Angeles? How'd you sell that on? Or how did it come to be?
Well, we sort of had a goal.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to be on the Tonight Show. That was it.
That's a huge goal.
Yeah, back then it was.
So we packed up a U-Haul with all of our chairs and video equipment. And I only had a motorcycle back then. So we put that on there. And Dave and Jerry both had cars. And there was another guy whose name was Dick Shutdown, who was also a Milwaukee guy. And we drove out to LA, and we found a vacant drug rehabilitation center that was all gnarly and whatnot, but we could rent it for $300 a month. So we rented it and fixed it up and made it both into a theater on the ground floor, and upstairs there was an apartment. So we lived upstairs, and it was cheap, $300 a month, and we opened a theater. I think at first we couldn't afford any publicity, so we'd go over to UCLA. The theater was on the west side of LA, not too far from UCLA. We figured our audience was mostly college-age kids, so we'd go over to UCLA and give away tickets and stuff like that. And a few people would show up, but actually at the beginning, the audience would be so small that there were more of us in the show than people in the audience. So
I've seen plays like that. That's okay.
Yeah. That's okay though. If you're into it.
But were you guys working on the side, or how are you paying for even the $300 a month?
I had saved up with my private investigator money.
Okay.
I'd saved up some money, and David had saved up, but like a few $1,000. And I think Jerry borrowed money from his parents. And it was pretty Spartan living at the beginning. The shows, when there were audiences were that small, after the show ended, we'd take them up and show them our apartment upstairs. I mean, it was really, but eventually what happened is some media started to find out about us, and we would get reviews, and eventually the LA Times found out and came and saw it and just wrote this unbelievable review that was so much fun. It was so positive that after that, we never had an empty seat in the house.
Nice.
The theater held, the theater held 120 unless there was going to be a fire inspection when we would get it down to 99.
Okay.
So, but after the LA Times review and some other reviews in the LA area started to show up, then we were full all the time. We
You
had
need to
to
get a
Now,
bigger place.
what was the timeline from when you arrived in LA,
Yeah.
redid that theater to
Yeah.
the LA Times article?
Like, how long did you have to persevere?
I think it took like 3 months of renovating the theater, and then maybe another 3 months until the LA Times showed up.
Wow.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's pretty expedited. In
Yeah,
a
you
lot
must have
of,
had a good thing.
Yeah,
going.
6 months is not that long.
entertainment.
Yeah.
You
No, and
guys
it didn't.
were good. That's why.
Yeah, it didn't seem that long to us, and eventually we even got on the Tonight Show. And we reached
Mission
our
accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you weren't done.
Well, here's what happened. The first night when Johnny Carson was hosting, we got bumped because there wasn't enough time. So the second night we came back, and Joey Bishop was the guest host. And his introduction was something like, well, there's this theater group, and I guess they're from Milwaukee. I've never heard of them before. They're called Kentucky Fried Theater. They're just these Midwestern folks. They must be scared to death. Please welcome, some horrible introduction like that. And it went downhill from there.
Oh,
they never rehearsed with us on camera. So
And he didn't get Johnny.
And we didn't get Johnny.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So, to bring up, but
Timing is key for
I
humor,
would
that's
say
for sure.
Up until, I don't know, not too many years ago, every time I go back to Milwaukee, I would have to apologize to people who stayed up late that night. Because it didn't work out that well. But it was a great learning experience for us, including that if you're gonna do comedy, and especially if you're gonna film comedy, it's good to be in control of where the camera is, who puts the camera where. I mean, it seems like elementary stuff, but that was part of our takeaway from that experience.
That, and don't let anyone from the Rat Pack introduce you.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So we never met John Carson, or maybe we met him backstage the first night, and I don't remember. But we had accomplished our goal, and we realized, that we weren't that comfortable on stage, and we knew that from the beginning. I think part of the appeal of the theater is that these guys would get on stage, and we clearly weren't actors, and it was we kind of the guys next door as opposed to polished thespians.
Jim, I tried to describe what you do because my daughter had never, my kids had never seen any of these movies, Airplane and all this other stuff. Which I was a bad dad, but anyway, when they were little, I had them watching Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy and Buster Keaton and stuff like that. I said it's kind of slapstick. It's like that, and those guys had those kind of budgets back then. They were starting from nothing too, but it's sort of an extension of that, I guess, and also a little bit like Saturday Night Live, which was kind of coming up at the same time as you guys. So I don't know. I was going to ask you if you compared yourself to them at all, or.
Well, part of the story is I think Lorne Michaels came to Kentucky Fried Theater and got a little bit of his inspiration for Saturday Night Live from seeing it, because he was very much that format, but on stage. And there's stuff in the book, I forget, but where he's quoted as saying that it was in part his motivation to start Saturday Night Live.
Wow. Well, who were your influences? They were clearly influenced by you. Who were your influences?
Yeah, well, Dave and Jerry would say the Marx Brothers. I was never a big fan because they were very broad, and the stuff I like best is more subtle, And I think Woody Allen was a huge influence. Is some of his early stuff in particular was great.
He was a great writer as well as making his own stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. And Annie Hall, of course, is just a complete classic. But there was nothing really that and there was a lot of improv theater going on in LA back then, but they were, again, much kind of broader, and they were political. And what we stayed away from, just sort of instinctively stayed away from, was politics. So we didn't do, the Second City was doing a skit to mocking Nixon or stuff, or even the war protests. We just stayed away from all that and stayed to look how silly commercials and movies and that kind of thing is. So I always, in my mind, I differentiate between, parody and something that wants to say something more. Dr. Strangelove was a great comedy, but it was satire.
Yeah.
And all we ever really aimed to do was parody. Once in a while, we'd kind of venture into satire, but not intentionally. I think that,
So how do you differentiate satire from just
satire? I think has a loftier goal than parody. Satire is trying to make a political comment, like Strangelove, or what was
I think of Jonathan Swift. I mean, as the ultimate satirist.
Yes, right. And we only wanted to say, hey, you don't have to take this seriously, and never sort of ventured into political stuff. And again, I don't think it was we made some sort of rule that said we can't go there. It's just that was never our instinct.
And when Airplane came out, was it 79? I was 9 years old. But I remember
1980.
Okay, 80. But I remember it was just, I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever saw in my life. My parents both loved it, and they're typically, not into that. But it was just so refreshing. I mean, what I could gather at 9, 10 years old. But it was just absolutely the most funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I like that you didn't go political for whatever reason, because now everything is just ridiculously crafted for one side or the other, and it's not funny. It really isn't.
My favorite scene from that movie, Jim, is when you got Barbara Billingsley up there and they're on this plane and there's these guys in the back talking, ghetto talk, and nobody can understand them. And she says, "Excuse me, but I speak jive." And then she interprets from, I mean, that was just the funniest thing ever. I don't know. I love that.
I think that inadvertently may have been one of the times that we slipped into satire, because when you think about it, and obviously I've overthought this over the last 45 years, but what that is about, here's what happened. We saw a movie called Shaft in 1975, which was a blaxploitation movie starring Richard Roundtree, and it was good, but we came out of the theater and we thought we didn't really understand a lot of what the actors were saying. It was a black cast and all that. So we thought that was the origin of subtitling the black guys. Wouldn't it be fun to put black guys in a movie and have them speak jive, and then have to subtitle? That was sort of the origin of that. And over the years, I think, and at first actually, when the movie first opened, I remember going to an area in Los Angeles where the audience was all black and sort of being apprehensive, like, how are they going to take this?
How did it go over?
Yeah,
huge. And and it still does, because when you think about it, it's the stupid white guy subtitles where the joke comes from.
Right.
Exactly.
So which is all about stupid white guys not understanding, which is sort of
yeah, that is actually, it's clear. It's clear. But I think as writing it, yeah, you're like cautious. How is this going to be received? Exactly.
And I just wondered today with I don't know if it'd go over today.
It would go over, but it'd be hard to sell it.
But it was hilarious back then.
Exactly. I mean, we could never make Airplane today. No. But, you know, sometimes when I'm feeling really bad about myself, I'll go onto the YouTube channel, and there are people watching Airplane for the first time on a YouTube and videoing themselves watching Airplane. And it's really fun and it's really cool. And invariably, when it's a black person, they laugh their asses off at that. They really, and they don't intellectualize, they just get it and they think it's funny. And when you think about it, maybe what it is sort of a commentary of the misunderstanding of white people about the black experience in America for the last 400 years.
Yes, there's a lot in that line. It's multifaceted, which makes it even funnier. So
exactly.
I gotta do one thing. I gotta allow myself to share screen from here. I'll edit this out. Give me 1 second.
We'll let it go.
Good thing we can't do live. It's just not.
Right.
We're just people with phones.
Yeah. I said it before, but I really do appreciate having you on, Jim. It's an unexpected honor. So.
No.
I got a scene from Airplane I'd like to share, but I first want to know, back up just a little bit. In 1977, you guys did release the Kentucky Fried Movie. Right. So how did that go over? Was it a success? I mean, then you got a bigger budget, I'm assuming, or guessing.
Or maybe you didn't even. I don't know. We
made Kentucky Fried Movie, by the way. We didn't direct. John Landis directed Kentucky. Okay. We wrote it. But we got to go to the set and see how movies are made. None of us ever took movie making courses in college or anything. So we didn't know very much. So we got to see that, and it was made for about $500,000 or $600, something like that. Okay. And so it did pretty well at the box office, certainly much and certainly enough to make the budget back. I think, I don't remember, but it did pretty well. And again, it got our feet in the door of studios so we could pitch Airplane.
All right, and John Landis is a great person to study under. He has a huge number of great movies.
Wow. Oh yeah, no, he's great, and he's a really fabulous guy. Yeah. And he's, to this day, we're still friendly.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, he's really bright, really energetic, funny guy.
All right, let me show that Airplane clip. It's a good one.
Altitude, 24,000 feet. Level flight, speed 520 knots. Course 090. Trim, mixture, wash, soak, rinse, spin.
Ted, what are you doing here? You can't fly this plane.
That's what I've been trying to tell these people.
Elaine, I don't have time to say this gently, so I'll be very direct. Everyone on this plane is in a desperate situation. Mr. Stryker is the only hope we've got.
Those are the flaps. That's the thrust. This must turn on the landing lights.
Mayday, what the hell is that?
Mayday? Why, that's the Russian New Year. You know, we'll have a big parade and we'll serve hot hors d'oeuvres.
I can't stand it anymore. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here.
Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Stewardess, please let me handle this.
I've got to get
Calm down. Now get back to your seat. I'll take care of this. Calm down. Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Doctor, you're wanted on the phone. Everything's gonna be all right. Please.
Sister, please, I'll handle this.
Yourself.
I've got to get out of
They have a whip after the gun. Okay.
Oh man.
Oh my gosh! All right,
That's good stuff.
I want to watch. I want to read the book, but how'd you come up with the lining up scene? I mean, obviously, no one likes somebody in a crisis getting hysterical, but where did that come from?
So here's where this takes a little magic out of it, maybe. But the way we would get material to do in our theater is we would keep the tape recorder on all night and tape in particular, looking for the stupidest commercials, because that's when the stupidest commercials are on, the middle of the night. So one day we got to work, and that's where we get our material. So one day we got to work, and we had taped a movie called Zero Hour, which was a 1957 melodrama starring Sterling Hayden and Dana Andrews and Linda Darnell, written by Arthur Haley. And it was Airplane, except serious. It was
Okay, I did see that. Yeah, I just hadn't seen the movie, but I saw that it was made off that. Okay.
Yeah, and somewhere, if you online, you can see scenes from Airplane intercut with scenes from Zero Hour.
I see.
It
Got
was
it.
a very serious melodrama about the guy with PTSD who gets on a plane. In that case, he was married. They were married, and it wasn't his stewardess. His wife wasn't a steward, but they were just traveling together as a family. But there's food poisoning, and he has to overcome his problems and land the plane and get his wife's respect back. So there was this perfect 3-act play. David and Jerry and I knew nothing about storytelling.
Okay.
We just knew we like to make fun of straight stuff.
Mhm.
So it was as though we got a Christmas tree and all we had to do is hang our ornaments on it. So we wrote Zero Hour as a comedy, and that's where it came from. And then we watched, in 1970s, there were tons of these old melodramas about disasters, Towering Inferno and Airport 75. So there was lots of fodder, and in watching one of those old movies, that's what we'd go to work every day and turn on the tape recorder and just sort of rewrite the scenes from Zero Hour.
Did you ever run into any copyright stuff, or did you just acknowledging this is a spoof of is it good enough? Or I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, no, well, there are specific rules. So what we did is we bought the rights to Zero Hour.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, for $2,500.
Solve that problem.
Oh, that's all.
It was
Perfect.
$2,500, and so because that is an issue, and in other parodies we worked on after that could be an issue, but then when we had the rights, we were free to wail away. And I don't think it was a scene from Zero Hour, but in all the other disaster movies we watched, there was a scene where a woman got hysterical.
Okay.
And the fun thing
who hasn't wanted to slap the crap out of a hysterical?
Well, if you got a crisis going on, it's like everybody stay calm. How we get past this, and then there's always somebody losing it.
And there was very, very little, because we'd been working on Airplane since 1974, actually since before we did Kentucky Fried Movie.
Oh, wow.
Right. So there was very little in Airplane that wasn't in the script. But one of the things that was improvised was when we pull back and you see the line of people waiting to hit the lady.
Yeah.
You know, with the guy with somebody with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the people is my mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna capture that and put that back over in the edit.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, so, and I'm trying to think of the name of the actress who played the lady who was being hit. And when we started filming the scene, we were just kind of shaking her, and she said, "No, you should hit me."
That was the other question. I mean, are they really laying into her? Because it looks very real.
I know it does.
It was.
And she said, "No, go ahead. That's the way they do it."
She did her own stunts.
So we
I like
did.
her. We gotta find her name then. She's cool.
Something. And she was actually, because earlier in the movie, she's the one who says, "Jim never has a second cup of coffee at home." And I don't know.
Yeah, those are the best.
Yeah, and that
every
was
time she's
actually,
suspicious about something and all that.
right. And Jim never vomits at home. And she was the actual actress who did the Jim never has a cup of coffee at home commercial in real life. And that's how we asked her.
That's how you found her.
That's funny.
So, all right, speaking of that, all right, so, well, really quick before, I do want to talk about how you find all these people, but the other thing is, what happened to Airplane 2? So, why, I mean, I guess I read, and I don't know if it's true that you guys never seen that and don't have any interest in seeing that, so who took that over?
Well, you know, when we made the deal with Paramount to make Airplane, they had, you know, the rights to do sequels.
Yeah.
And they offered it to us, obviously, but we just couldn't think of any other, you know, airplane jokes to do. So we turned it down. And no, we never have seen it. What we did say is maybe we could do a spoof of Godfather and make it so Bob and Julie had landed and somehow got involved in the mafia and do a spoof of Godfather. But Francis Coppola was working with Paramount then.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "No, you can't do it because I want to do Godfather 3.
Okay.
So we could have saved the world from Godfather 3.
That would have been good.
All right. So is it true that you guys were the ones that discovered Val Kilmer?
Yes.
And how do you find these people? All right, how do you recognize talent? All right, tell us how you found Val Kilmer, and then tell us how you.
Val was in a play called. We went to New York to do some casting for Top Secret, and there was an off-Broadway play called Slab Boys that starred, believe it or not, Val and Sean Penn and Kevin Bacon. And they were all these kind of unknown guys back then. And so we went and saw it, and he was great too. Obviously, they're all great. I don't remember what the play was about, but they were great. And so he came in and auditioned based on, excuse me, us seeing him in Slab Boys, and his audition was fabulous. I mean, he really, and there's a documentary out now about Val, and he took his auditions very seriously. And so he came in as Elvis. He had rehearsed an Elvis song, and he was terrific, and he was a gorgeous kid. And so it was pretty easy casting him.
And did he study at Juilliard? I mean, he studied
at Juilliard. He's a real school actor.
Yeah, he can sing. He's got it all.
Well, exactly. And you know, I remember thinking, I thought honestly he was the most beautiful man I'd ever met. He was so handsome.
Well, let's play a clip of that. Can we do that?
Cool.
All right, cool.
Security has been tightened throughout the country. All borders have been placed on full alert. Exit visas have been suspended for the entire week. In addition, we have received assurances from our undercover agents in the West that our actions to date have gone completely undetected. All military leaves have been cancelled, and we have doubled the guard around Dr. Flamand. And finally, all systems are in readiness for deployment of the Polaris mine, just as you ordered, General Streck.
Well done, von Horst. By Sunday, the entire NATO submarine fleet will be here on their maneuvers and completely vulnerable. Am I your Kumpler? What is the progress with our diversionary plan?
The schedule for the cultural festival is now complete, Herr General. And you should be pleased to note that at your personal request, the Soviets have agreed to send their celebrated tenor, Vladimir Biletnikov.
Well done, Herr Mayer. Then everything has gone according to the plan.
Well, not exactly, mein General. The American, Leonard Bernstein, unfortunately has had to cancel. But they are sending another performer in his place. In fact, we have just received this copy of his most recent record album. His name is Nick Rivers.
I'm sure he will be quite adequate. As long as the attention of the world is firmly fixed on our cultural festival, no one will know what is about to happen. And once again, Germany will become united under one rule, ours. After Sunday, there will be no one to stop us.
Skeet surfing, skeet surfing. If everybody had a 12 gauge and a surfboard too, you see them shooting and surfing from here to Malibu. Because it's totally bitchin', riding waves to blast their pigeons, and it's so neat shooting ski while you're riding on the heavies all day. First wave, don't get tired. Second wave, pull higher. Third wave, pull higher. We're waxing down our surfboards and loading up our traps. Tell the teacher we're shooting, we're never coming back. I've got a gun rack in my Chevy for when the surf and the flat get heavy, and we'll have fun with our guns till our lifeguard takes our ammo away. First wave, don't get us tired. Second wave, pull us higher. Third wave, pull us higher. Sweet surfing. First wave, get us higher. Second wave, pull us higher. Third wave, pull us sharing sunsets with my favorite girl. When we shoot the girl, we really shoot the girl. First wave, don't get us higher. Second wave, pull us higher. Third wave, pull us higher. First wave, get relaxed. Second wave, pull us higher. Third wave, ride us higher. I wish they all could be the wish they all could be
Okay. I was pretty well hooked from the beginning.
Yeah, good stuff.
Maybe go back for where Val Kilmer was. Was that the beginning?
Oh, he isn't in here yet. All right, here. Let me skip through to the another scene that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Because his question is really quick before. Yeah, go ahead and say yeah. That's
funny.
Yeah, you got to get into that image too. All right, so was Top Secret much more complex to film than Airplane? I mean, you have so many things going on. You got music, choreography, everything. Was it more complicated than Airplane?
I don't think the underwater scene was kind of complicated. and the backward scene was kind of complicated. But I think the shooting schedule is about the same length as Airplane. The wonderful thing about Top Secret is that we filmed in London. So we got to spend a year in London, and it was fabulous. And this is actually, that's not a California beach, that's Brighton.
Okay.
Coast of, of England, right. And it was just a fabulous year. We had so much fun, and we hadn't, you know, we talk about this in the book, we hadn't quite learned the lessons of Airplane. We just thought you can string together an hour and a half of jokes and everything's going to work out fine. And we really didn't pay enough attention to plot and story, you know, the nuts and bolts of good storytelling, you know, 3 acts and character arc and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until after this movie came out and didn't do so well that we started figuring out, you know, where we had missed the boat.
Yeah, there were some criticisms about the plot, but really, I mean, are you going, and yes, okay, it can make a bigger hit and sell more movies and seats, but Weird Al Yankovic said it was his favorite movie of all time. So all right, here's Val Kilmer. Let's do, because this set,
and his recommendation was right up there. So
but this scene right here is very. It's, to me, it seems very elaborate, and we can get some Val Kilmer here. All right, let's go here. Look at the set on this; it's immaculate.
Yeah, cool set.
Was this on location somewhere?
It was on a sound stage, and the guy who, the art director for this movie was a guy named Peter Lamont.
Okay.
And he brought his whole crew, and Peter did all the Bond movies.
The name is
okay.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Rivers.
You skip to where he starts singing and dancing, and you see the full set.
Your Ripple Blanc, sir.
Jürgen, escort this lady out.
Excuse me, but this lady is with me.
Ah, Mr. Rivers. 1,000 pardons, madame.
After you, my dear. You're just in time. You know, I don't think I've ever seen you looking so lovely.
Thank you. That was very kind of you.
My pleasure. I was looking for someone to dance with.
You're an American.
That's right.
My uncle was born in America.
Oh, really?
But he was one of the lucky ones. He managed to escape in a balloon during the Jimmy Carter presidency.
There's the political joke.
You have a handful of political jokes in here.
You have to throw some in.
Expensive cars. And how the young people waste their time watching television and listening to rock and roll music.
What's wrong with television?
Not all television. MASH was okay, and the old Mary Tyler Moore Show. It just seems like the young people of America take their freedom for granted.
Now, wait a minute. I don't think you're being fair. You know, my history class once spent an entire week in Philadelphia.
Maybe so. You can talk about freedom all you want, but still, you don't know what it's like to have to fight for it.
Watching that old guy.
That's beautiful. All right, let me skip through the part where he's dancing. Yeah, look at this set and look at his talent here. It's
yeah, he was amazing.
Babaloo bam. bam, a la bam, boom. Got a girl named Sue. She knows just what to do. Got a girl named Sue. She knows just what to do. She knows how to love me, yes indeed. Oh boy, you don't know what she do to me. To the fruity, oh Rudy. 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 Oh, wop, bop-a-loo, bam, a la bam, boom. Got a girl named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. Got a girl named Daisy. She almost drives me crazy. She rocked me to the east, she rocked me to the west, but she's the girl that I love best. So to the fruity, oh Rudy. 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 Oh, wop, bop-a-loo, bam, a la bam, boom.
All right, good.
I got a quick question. If you were to make movies today and you know, spoofing something today, what would you do?
Good
Obviously,
question.
you did different things then than you do now. What would you do today?
I don't know. I mean, the popular movies are these big sci-fi, you know, it's kind of, I really don't know. I think, and I really haven't been in that business for quite a while. David Zucker is still in trying to get stuff done, and I think his latest script is some sort of spoof of a film noir movie or something. But I don't know. It was much more obvious back in those days what to do. Couple stories about that scene that we just saw in that set was a nice set. It was pretty cool. And the beginning the beginning of this establishing shot, which shows the whole big room. We were on one side of the room with the camera, and took forever to light it and get it all set. And my mom and David and Jerry's mom were sitting in a table way in the back of the room. And you see them later in the shot where Bell grabs onto the chandelier and he lands in front of two women. And they sort of react to him dancing. But at the beginning of the establishing shot, way across the room from the camera, I see my mom sitting there way in the, going like this. And I said, what, Mom? Like, what could it possibly be? And she's going like this. So I say, cut, excuse me. I go over to my mom, who's sitting at that table, and she said, I said, what's going on? She said, I don't have my eye makeup on. So she thought that we had to cut the shot and put her eye makeup on. So anyway, I think about that when I look at that big establishment. And it was a fabulous set. But as I say, those were some of the best filmmakers and technicians that we got to work with in London.
Jim, I'm curious, do you see anybody kind of carrying the torch? I mean, torch in the sense that, you know, I when I look back at slapstick and I see maybe it's beginnings in vaudeville and I think of Looney Tunes and I think of, you know, that expanding and evolving. Do you think anybody is doing anything like that today? What do you think is the demise of slapstick? I know there's filmmakers that are I know the Coen brothers are masters of subtlety, but do you think anybody is really doing it? What's going to be the fate of this genre of comedy?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't, could we get away with Airplane today or Top Secret today? I just don't know if, I think audiences would like it as much, but I think back then there was more freedom, and there's so much in today's culture that really doesn't allow room for that.
Well,
yeah, the
I have.
latest,
Yeah, go ahead.
You were involved with Scary Movie 4, right? But that's the latest example of slapstick in that realm. But I can.
Still kind of a while back, though. I mean, it's been a few years since
that was 2004, and
lots happened.
I worked on Scary Movie 3 was good. Scary Movie 4, I wasn't a particular fan of, and there hasn't been that kind of parody since, or it was successful. So it'll be interesting to see where the next generation of parody people get their material.
Well, we need more of that because people are too uptight.
Well, I have a theory. Along that line.
Ready to explode.
Yes, that is it. I think everyone is about ready to start laughing at the same time about all that repressed humor that they got building up. So I got a theory I want to run by you guys, and Jim in particular. All right, his question is, why is something funny? A lot of people think, and I want to know if you have a theory, but I want to tell a little story because I got to tell the story, which is super funny, probably the funniest thing that's ever happened in my life. And I was watching your movies the other day, and it kind of clicked. I go, I think this is why everything is funny. So when I got out of the hospital, my son got out of the hospital, my wife and I, we just came back from Nam or something. We were basket cases, okay? And so we had, as you knew, Jim, in your story, when you get out of the hospital, you're just like, what happened? We're free, but we don't feel free. And it was Mother's Day or something. And all the family had us come together, my mom, my sister, everyone, and all of her friends and all of the kids. And there's this long table, and it's the first time we were out doing anything after we got out of that horror story. And my wife and I are at the end of the table with my son David, and he has a G-tube. And so you have this syringe, okay? And when the kid burps laying down, you got to take the gas out of the stomach. And it comes out with stomach juice, partially digested food, and a lot of gas. And you pull it back down, and you take the air out, and you push it back up the fluid, and you put that back in the stomach. And so my wife is doing this at the table, and the family, of course, is looking away because they've never seen anything like this before. And they're talking about amongst themselves. And there's something that happens. Sometimes the fluid gets past the bubble, and it squirts out. And we're at the dinner table at the restaurant, and it squirted out all the way across the table, across all of our family and friends. And my wife turns to me in horror and goes, oh my God. And when we realized nobody could see it, we just started laughing for the first time in a year and a half. And we were rolling, our tears were coming out of our eyes, and all of our family turns around and looks at us like we're crazy, and they're like, oh, they're finally laughing again. And we're going, yeah, because that's your food right now. And I kind of thought about that, and as went on, we laughed the entire night, first time in a year and a half, and it clicked to me, why do they laugh? It might be a coping mechanism for things that shouldn't happen. So some people say things are funny because they're true, but plants produce chlorophyll, that's true, but it's not funny. But when it's something that shouldn't happen or shouldn't happen, I wonder if it's like a safety mechanism of the brain just to laugh at the things that, and I shouldn't have said that because my wife's going to kill me when she watches this, because we never told anyone about it. We still laugh today about it because it was so wrong.
You never told those people.
We never told anyone, so sorry, hon. She's going to come in the room right now with the bat.
Somebody's going to come after you.
I know. It was all our family. And after a while, they were insisting that we tell them what was so funny. And we're like, no, we're not Nobody said, I wonder if there's a leak in a room. Nobody felt it at all, which made it all the funnier. But it's something that shouldn't have happened. But that's what made it all the funnier. It's the funniest thing that's ever happened in my life. And I wonder if the world's going to explode right now from all this repressed humor, things they want to be laughing about, but they can't. So what do you think about that? So things that shouldn't happen.
Well, I mean, my experience and with the kind of stuff we did, there's something very therapeutic about laughing, having something pointed out to you that you used to take seriously that isn't worth taking seriously. I'm not sure that this is apropos to your story, but you know, if you hear your whole life people say, oh, surely you can't be serious. And then if somebody says, I am serious and don't call me Shirley, your whole life we heard that expression and nobody ever pointed out how, you know, how silly that can be. Right. And so when you laugh at that joke, in a sense, you're laughing at yourself because you took it seriously for your whole life. And I think that's very therapeutic when you can laugh at yourself. If you can have a self-effacing sense of humor. I think a little bit that the reason, especially Airplane, was successful is because, you know, Leslie Nielsen and Robert Stack and Peter Graves were laughing at themselves, at their own careers. They had all spent a whole life playing these serious guys, and suddenly they were sending up those serious guys. And I don't know, I think the audience got that, and that's therapeutic. I don't know. What do you think? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally. No, I get it.
100%. Yeah. I've got a completely unrelated question. Leslie Nielsen is known, rest in peace, for doing a lot of real flagellance on talk shows and interviews. Is that your experience? I'm just curious.
You mean me personally having?
Yeah, have you ever seen Leslie Nielsen purposely pass gas?
He was never without his fart machine. He had this little thing that he put in his hand, and he would do a fart.
So it wasn't actual flatulence. It was simulated.
No, it was simulated.
Because Palmer has a skill of farting on command.
Really?
Well, that's a handy one.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know he had a machine. I always thought it was real.
No, it was. He would play. He did it on the set when we were shooting, and he would often do it, you know, on elevators or when we were doing live, you know, promotion stuff. And the interviewer wouldn't know that he had this machine, and he went off and kind of rooked around uncomfortably, and he never knew how to handle it.
Oh, I'd have to look at the footage because I wonder if they were like trying to smell it to see if it was real.
Oh no, it looked real. Yeah.
Look, and he can have that deadpan look on his face while he's doing it too. So.
He was brilliant.
I just had to ask.
As a matter of fact, he wound up giving one of those things to everybody on the crew.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and eventually they had to be banned because he couldn't be filming done.
Yeah.
Couldn't finish a scene.
Well, you know, a fart is inherently funny, and the more serious the situation, the funnier it is. It's just it kind of confirms what you were talking about, Jeff. You know,
we're all guys, right?
Shouldn't happen.
It's funny because it shouldn't happen. Yeah, you're in a private or an important meeting or an interview or something. All of a sudden, you let it go. It's one of those things that shouldn't happen, which is why it's so funny. just a working theory.
Fart humor is coming back. It never gets old. It'll be funny when you're 80 or 3.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's the essence of guy humor.
Yes. Well, actually, my daughter, she has a lot of guy in her because she'll be doing that. You know, we'll be sitting all the family together, and she'll fart, and she'll go, Jeffrey. She's like, she's been doing that on her own. No one taught her that.
Blame somebody else. Yeah.
So she's got the guy humor too, but she has 2 brothers. So.
All
right. Good. Jim, how did you meet your wife, Nancy?
Oh, okay. Well, I used to live, I wasn't expecting that. I used to live in an apartment, and my neighbors downstairs were a gay couple, Michael and Michael, and they would give parties every once in a while, and the parties would be really loud, and they didn't want me to complain, so they would invite me to the parties. And Big Michael, there was Big Michael and Little Michael, had a straight job in some, I forget what kind of industry he was in. And Nancy, my wife, was what they used to call a beard. She would go with him to his work functions so he could pretend he was straight.
Okay, never heard of that. All right.
Yeah, called a walker. The other term's a walker.
Oh, huh. Well, back then anyway, she was his beard. And so when these guys would give parties, they would invite a lot of women and a lot of guys, and all the guys would be gay, and I'd be the only straight guy. So all these women would be
easy
there.
picking, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I want to go to that part.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad.
No, it was wonderful. And so that she was his beard, and we met at one of Michael and Michael's parties.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Your career in comedy took an abrupt change, so I'd like to go to the Dateline clip if I could.
What's the year that this came out? That you're going to play?
94.
94.
He is one of Hollywood's most successful
Still made
directors,
movies after
but Jim Abrams will tell you his filmmaking
Correct.
is not his greatest success. He is far prouder of how he helped his son overcome a devastating disease. After trying just about everything, this devoted father discovered a treatment that transformed not just his son's life, but the lives of thousands of other children as well. It's a story as dramatic as any movie, and as you're about to see, one in which Dateline played a part. Here's John Larson.
Action!
Patrol boats coming!
Cut. Right away back. Wait till you hear patrol boat coming.
Jim Abrams made some of the most successful film comedies of the 1980s.
Okay, let's print that. We'll do one more like that.
His movies include Airplane, Naked Gun, and Hot Shots. But the fun stopped for Jim Abrams 9 years ago. He was finishing his latest movie when suddenly his one-year-old son Charlie began having unexplained seizures.
On his first birthday, I was pushing him in a swing out in the front yard, and I noticed his head kind of went like that, and he threw his arm up in the air.
Jim and his wife Nancy took Charlie to a neurologist who did a series of tests on Charlie's brain. The tests confirmed the doctor's suspicion. Little Charlie had epilepsy. But nothing prepared the Abrams for the nightmare to come. Charlie began having many more seizures. Sometimes he'd have 100 seizures a day.
Another seizure.
Sometimes Charlie would just go limp.
Okay, that was a drop seizure.
Other times he'd shake.
He's stiff as a board right now.
The worst kind of seizure.
Charlie.
The Abrams brought Charlie to Dr. Donald Shields, a nationally recognized expert at UCLA, who tried to control Charlie's seizures with anticonvulsant drugs.
And then we lost control and just nothing was working. I think he probably had all of the available medications, and we were starting to look at some of the more experimental kinds of medications.
Even worse, Jim Abrams says the drugs had a terrible side effect. They were turning his son into a zombie.
You pour the drugs down the child's throat, your child's throat, despite the fact there's something inside you that says, wait a minute, this can't be right. You know, Charlie was so loaded. At times he just lived in a car seat. He was so blotto from these drugs that he was essentially non-functional.
This little girl is about to have a bad epileptic seizure.
Here she goes.
Now, while you're watching this, consider this. New miracle drugs control these terrible seizures in most of the 750,000 children in this country who suffer from epilepsy. But for this girl, and for 150,000 kids like her, drugs simply don't work. The Abrams feared Charlie was one of these most unfortunate children.
After the first drug, then there is only a 10 to 15% chance that the second drug will work, regardless of what that drug is. And the percentages drop from there.
Even more frightening, if left unchecked, these seizures can damage their brains, retarding these children forever. So the Abrams were racing against the clock. They had to stop Charlie's seizures before it was too late. They allowed doctors to operate on Charlie's brain, but the seizures continued. They even tried a faith healer, but that didn't work either.
This house was filled with tears. All of us, all the time, cried. I mean, Charlie's brother and sister literally, for months, cried themselves to sleep at the foot of his crib because they just had some sort of instinct that they wanted to be near him.
His son was slipping away. His whole family was in anguish, and the doctors had no answers. Jim Abrams was desperate. He decided to start his own study of epilepsy. He attended medical lectures and read every book he could find on epilepsy treatment. And one day in a medical library, he found something no one had told him about. A book describing a diet that supposedly cured half of the epileptic kids who went on it.
And it was like dumbfounding. How could that possibly be?
The book claimed that experts here in Baltimore were perfecting something called the ketogenic diet, a diet consisting largely of something most doctors tell us to avoid: generous helpings of fat. Against his own doctor's advice, Jim brought Charlie to Johns Hopkins Children's Center, where he found the man who wrote the book, Dr. John Freeman. There, they also met a 72-year-old dietitian, Millicent Kelly, who had been working with the diet for 40 years.
So this is the one to use, even though this has a much better flavor.
Now retired and a part-time consultant, Millie had designed meals that gave kids just enough protein to grow on, combined with lots of fat, bacon, butter, and heavy whipping cream. The families have to measure every bite of every meal precisely, or else Millie says the diet won't work.
Whatever happens there to cause that seizure just doesn't happen anymore.
Okay.
And they become seizure-free, and that's a remarkable thing.
Bobby.
Finally, it was Charlie's turn to try Millie's diet. He was taken off all medications and fed mostly fats. His father says it was a miracle.
His seizures started to diminish immediately. I mean, it was pretty dramatic. You could hold him and you could kind of feel him be less intense. And within a couple of days, he stopped having seizures completely.
Sometimes there is truth in the old ways, even if we don't understand them.
Dr. John Freeman supervises the keto diet at Johns Hopkins.
Do you fully understand how it works?
We have no clue how it works. And that's part of the reason it hasn't been accepted in lots of places.
Oh, look what she's
But consider the results. Most kids who try the diet at Hopkins can go back to normal food after 2 years, never need drugs again, and remain seizure-free.
If I see results like I've been seeing, yeah, there's so many encouraging words talking to other parents that have been on the diet, and it works.
I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to get you.
Jim and Charlie returned to Los Angeles, where Charlie thrived.
I'm coming. Here I come. Here I come. I'm coming. I'm coming to get you. Here I come.
No longer a zombie on medications, the seizures were gone. But the story doesn't end there.
All of a sudden, your eyes open up in the middle of the night, and you say, wait a minute. You know, this didn't have to happen. 90% of these seizures didn't have to occur. Waking up around the clock and pouring drugs down his throat didn't have to occur.
Jim was angry and puzzled that none of the 6 doctors he went to for help ever mentioned the diet.
What has stopped Charlie's seizures has been in existence for 70 years. It's been sitting there. It was waiting for him.
You had some knowledge that this diet was probably working back at Johns Hopkins, and yet you dissuaded the Abrams from attempting it. How come?
Well, because I don't think we had exhausted all of the medical approaches yet. There were actually still other medications that we hadn't tried yet.
Dr. Freeman tells us that 50 to 70% of the patients that come through his doors and get put on the diet have success. Can you think of any drugs in these hard cases that have 50 to 70% success rates?
Probably not anything that comes up to that level.
So why are modern doctors ignoring this diet? Charlie's own doctor has a surprising answer.
There's no big drug company behind a ketogenic diet, and there probably can never be unless somebody starts marketing sausage and eggs with cream sauce on it as a drug.
You're saying that in a sense, one of the reasons that the ketogenic diet is not popular at this point is because there's not a big drug company behind it, selling it to the doctors.
I think that's probably true. I hate to say that, but I think it's probably true.
It does not come in a pill form. It cannot be administered with a scalpel. And the only people who profit from the ketogenic diet are the patients.
When we left the Abrams family in 1994, Charlie was 2.5 years old, and the seizures had stopped. But as Jim would soon find out, Charlie's life, as well as his own, were about to change forever.
Getting the word out about Charlie's new diet makes a difference for thousands of children and sends Jim Abraham's career in a whole new direction.
I actually got to call her up one day and say, Meryl Streep is playing you. And we made a movie about the ketogenic diet.
Charlie's father starts a crusade.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw that movie. That was awesome.
So, Jim, does that capture some of the previous video that you wanted to show, or is that, should I really find out? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that very much tells the story.
Yeah, I thought so too.
At the beginning, anyway. What's the evolution of the diet since then has been far beyond anything I think anyone would have anticipated, because as Charlie's doctor, Dr. Freeman from Hopkins, said, we have no clue why it works, and that is part of the reason the medical community has been resistant. Well, and most of the stuff you just showed was from 94.
Yeah.
And since 94, there has been more attention paid to the diet. I mean, the Dateline thing had a huge effect. You know, people can imagine having a sick kid and being home and seeing that on TV, and, you know, like pediatric neurologists had their phones ring off the hook. And part of the upside was the scientific community started paying attention to why the diet works. What are the mechanisms of the diet? And as they've gotten into it more and more, they've connected some dots with how the diet not just works for epilepsy, but for other neurological disorders like psychiatric disorders and brain cancer and ALS and stuff like that. So there's been a huge upsurge in the use of the diet, as well as the science behind the diet, because it's really efficacious with a whole bunch of mental problems.
Do they know how the diet works today?
Well, they're closer.
Okay.
You know, the brain is very complex, and now there are all these scientific communities. There's one called Metabolic Health Summit that just had a meeting a month ago in Florida, and there were a bunch of speakers about the applications, talking about the mechanisms for the applications for all the disorders. Some of it has to do with the gut. Most of it, I think, has to do with mechanisms in the brain. And the brain is hugely complicated. And so I don't think there is an absolute definitive, because it addresses a bunch of not only different kinds of epilepsy, but other kind of neurological disorders. So the mechanism for schizophrenia might not be the same as for epilepsy as for brain cancer. But these are among the areas where there's a lot of science is rolling in, and mercifully, you know, science, people don't randomly fund science. They usually fund science based on, what at the end of the rainbow, can we sell a pill? And there's no pill behind ketogenic diet, but now they're what they call exogenous ketones, and there are all sorts of companies that make ketogenically balanced meals and whatnot. So there is some money. So more research is being done into mechanisms. But I think that, in answer to your question, there are many mechanisms, and they're not the same for every disorder.
Okay.
How old Charlie is now, and how's he doing?
Charlie is going to be 32 in March.
Nice.
Can you imagine? He was over yesterday. We watched the Super Bowl together. He's has a certificate in early childhood education. He works at the Salvation Army in a preschool. He works with preschoolers. He has some autism, but he lives independently. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and he plays piano, and he boxes, and he in many ways is the love of my life.
I just was going to comment on watching that video, watching that doctor afterwards, say, he asked him, well, why didn't you advise this? It's been around for 70 years. And he said, now I'm forgetting exactly what he said. We hadn't exhausted all the medical possibilities. It's like, wait a minute, you don't even start with the medical possibilities until you exhaust the non-medical ones.
But I appreciate his candor.
And I wanted to punch him, but then he got better. So.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, at the time when that came out,
doctors don't know.
Well, when that came, he was, the lay community thought, wow, here's a doctor who's willing to speak the truth. But many of his colleagues he was reviled by many of his colleagues for being so blunt about the influence of drugs. You said, how's Charlie doing? The other thing I didn't mention is he's never had another seizure. And
that's brilliant.
That's amazing. And he was on the diet actually for 5 years, because after 2 years, when we tried to wean him off, the seizures returned. So we put him back on the diet for another 2 years, and then tried to wean him off, and they came back. But then the third time, when we weaned him off the diet, seizures never came back. So he hasn't had a seizure for 25 years, and he eats whatever he wants, never taken another anti-epileptic drug or anything.
That's amazing. That's great. My daughter had one seizure, and it was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. She was 1 year old, and I did long-term seizure monitoring in the early 90s as one of my jobs. But I knew to put her on her side and videotape it to see if they can glean anything off that information. But she had a UTI that was massive that explained it. So, but it's amazing that that you did your due diligence, you did your research, and was able to help not only him but many other people. And I think this information needs to be readily available as an option. It's not 100%, I wouldn't imagine, but what's the harm in trying that?
Statistically, and actually a much younger version of me said this on that video, after the failure of a first medication, there's a 15% chance the second one will work, and a 1% chance the third one will work. So after now, in a medical consensus agreement written by neurologists and dietitians and scientists who are in that field, they say the ketogenic diet should be strongly recommended after the failure of 2 medicines. I personally think
before that
that's kind of conservative, and I don't know why it for many.
But at least they're mentioning it as part of the protocol, which is wonderful.
It's not yet standard of care. Hopefully, in the near future, it will become standard of care. The big drawback, I think, to lots of people recommending it now is they don't have access to dietitians who are trained in the ketogenic diet who can help people initiate the diet. So rather than refer to a hospital where there is a trained dietitian, they just keep drugging the kid.
And is that what the Charlie Foundation helps patients that are in this predicament to navigate that?
Yeah, we have a website, charliefoundation.org, and among their interviews with lots of scientists and doctors and dietitians who are experts in diet. But about one other thing that we have is a list of all the hospitals around the world who now
that's wonderful resource.
Ketogenic diet, and independent dietitians who are skilled, and we vetted this list clearly, who are skilled in the ketogenic diet. So you can contact them, or patient or parents or whatever can contact them directly, and they can help you initiate the diet with yourself or with your kid. Because now it's being shown that it's equally efficacious for adults with epilepsy. The hardest thing for adults is compliance. You know, when you're a little kid like Charlie, he
your mom and dad tell you to.
He just ate whatever we put in front of him. But adults have their own eating preferences, etc. And so going on a ketogenic diet, which is very restrictive, can be put a lot of people off. So, but and that said too, there are tons of recipes available on our website in cookbooks all over the place for ketogenically balanced meals that people can follow and put themselves on the diet. One of the huge, really in the last couple of years, one of the huge applications is for severe mental disorders like schizophrenia and bipolar, and where people will go on, psychiatrists have no, up until recently, alternative to the drugs, which have horrible side effects, including lots of weight gain and fogginess and whatnot. So that's there's been a real explosion of interest in the diet in the psychiatric community.
All right, and Jeff, I think you're going to put the resources links to his foundations where folks can get help.
Yeah, I will, absolutely, because I think that is the most important thing through this entire discussion is if somebody has their kid right now and they're having seizures, they're on medicines, they can watch this and go, okay, I'll go through the resources. But the biggest issue that I found is that nobody was coming. We were in the hospital with David, and even coming out, nobody was mentioning the ketogenic diet. So this is in recent years, and they all know about it by now, and they're still not offering it as an option. And to get a doctor or a neurologist on board with this, we had to have a little verbal argument with the current one, and then leave and call the insurance company and say, we are without a neurologist right now. And I'll go to his website, and I type in, it has a list of these dietitians to get in contact, and there's one in Cincinnati. And because I was trying to bring up to the neurologist, we tried all these drugs and none of them work. They're just making it worse. He's got airway issue. None of these drugs should be on him. They're all respiratory suppressants. Let's try the ketogenic diet. He's fighting it. And so the resources are the most important thing, because then we call the dietitians, and they just went through the hospital and the whole system, coordinated everything, grabbed a neurologist. They set it all up. It's the dietitians that are doing it. Now, the neurologist was on board and supportive, but it's the dietitians that are doing it. They're the ones that are working hard and coordinating everything within the hospital. So we get in there, and they knew he had airway defects, so they called pulmonologists, they had ENT, they had the neurologist, and the dietitians were running the show. And that's what healed. The resources that Jim is offering and making available is what saved my son, because he was dying. His airway was bad, and it was going through. With Laryngomalacia, it gets worse up to the point, and then it peaks, and then it gets better. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse, and his breathing was getting worse and worse and worse. And then, of course, if you're suffocating, you'll have seizures. And so he was having seizures. It was the point where, and a lot of kids that we were partnering up with on Facebook and whatever in these groups, their kids were dying, and they had the same thing. And we're going, because you're not supposed to give these medicines. It says right on the label, if you speak with any pharmacist, you are not supposed to give these medicines to people with obstructive sleep apnea or laryngomalacia. They will die. And so it was like, how do we get them off this? The neurologist will not do. The pulmonologist was helping, but they can't pull off medicines that the neurologist put on. It's the dietitians. It's the resources that Jim gave, and get in touch with the dietitians at a hospital. And that right there is the solution, because you can always find a different neurologist, but you got to save your kid first, first do no harm, which is kind of the point. So that's a little bit long babbling, but really for me, it was the dietitians is the way that made it happen.
Right. And one of the ways the diet has become more sophisticated is you can use a ketogenic diet. In a sense, even it's easier for tube-fed kids, because you can blend together a ketogenically balanced diet for tube-fed people and just feed it. So in a sense, it's kind of easier to put them on the diet.
It was very easy, yes. Yeah, we had no problems. He had a G-tube. It was all very easy for us once he was on it.
I'm wondering if the people that I know who have suffer from, epilepsy or bipolar or other disorders, they take drugs and they're afraid to get off of them because they don't want to have that happen again. And anyway, but they would, maybe have a seizure once a year, it's not, or even less often than that. So if they did the ketogenic diet, how would they even know if it worked? That's the problem that they run into.
Yeah, and then
once a year is different. There's a lot of seizure
or a
patients
bipolar
that complete
episode
30, 40 times a day with medication.
Right. I know, but I'm not. The people I know don't have that. They have it once a year. I know a number of people who have that kind of thing. So
if they're
he did allude to it can help with different bipolar and whatnot, but I'm sure there's a lot of research in that as well. But sorry to interrupt, Jim.
Well, I think a lot of, I didn't realize it at the time, but when we started the Charlie Foundation, sort of subtext is we're all in charge of our own medical destiny and the medical destiny of our kids. So what I would suggest to someone who's having a seizure a year is look into it. And if you don't mind taking whatever the drug is you're on, why go through that, a big lifestyle change if you don't want to? I mean, so there's no one size fits all, I guess. And so it's up to each of us, like I say, to learn the facts. It's interesting when we found the ketogenic diet hiding in plain sight in the medical library in '94, there was no internet.
Yeah.
So you had to go to a library. I don't know if people know what libraries are anymore, but you had to go. And now there's lots of information and lots of good information online, so you can educate yourself about what's involved. And if you have questions, find a dietitian and run it by her. I say her because they're all women.
It does seem that way.
You mentioned that taking these drugs sometimes causes weight gain, so I know that can happen. And I've also heard that the ketogenic diet has been now, in the past few years only, been promoted as a weight loss.
Well, that's interesting. Actually, what was the guy's name in the 70s? Jeez. It's been known as a weight loss diet for years. And if I could think of the guy's name, you'd know who it is. the
A celebrity or a doctor?
Which I started reading a while ago. I don't know if this is one you recommend. Maybe you recommend some others.
There's tons of good stuff. We have a bunch of books that we recommend on our website too. How can I not think? But the ketogenic diet was a weight loss diet, I think, starting in the 1970s. How can I not think of this guy's name? And it was very popular. And even though it was developed as in the 1920s, it was developed at the Mayo Clinic for epilepsy. In the 70s, they started to use it for weight loss, and it's very effective because essentially, I mean, I said they don't know the specific, very complicated mechanisms of the diet, but it changes, what the diet does is change your metabolism from burning sugar, glucose for energy, to burning fat for energy. And the byproduct of burning fat for energy is you make ketone bodies. And the ketone bodies have a very positive effect on the brain. And again, depending on this disorder, for any number of reasons. So to that, and the other point that I always make, or I try to make when I get on the subject, is they talk about risk benefit in the medical profession. The risk of trying a ketogenic diet, and especially trying a ketogenic diet with the help of a dietitian, is virtually none. And the benefit can be, well, like in Charlie's case, life-changing.
Gave him his life back.
Yeah, and give his life back. Yeah, so, and again, I think it's up to each of us to do his homework and figure that out and figure out what's appropriate and what they can handle. There's some doctors, the last remaining myth that comes out of the medical community, back in the day when Charlie was put on the diet, part of the myths, many of them included, like, it'll stunt his growth, it'll cause him to have a heart attack.
None of those things happened.
No, and they don't. And that was literally myth. But the last remaining myth is that it's too difficult. And you hear that all the time. And I always wonder where in medical school they teach a course in what's too difficult for the patient or the parents of a patient to endure. I don't think, I'd like to audit that class. I don't think they teach it. And so it's amazing how many families we'll hear from who'll have like 5 kids and one kid is on the diet, but somehow and the parents are working and yada, yada, and you would think it would be impossible, but they pull it off and the kid gets better. If the kid gets better, it's a huge incentive to keep pulling it off. Mm-hmm. So that's the last remaining myth I'd like to deal with. It should be the patient's decision whether or not therapy is too difficult for him or her or their family.
I think by the time a parent has seen 100 seizures a day over a period of days, they will do anything. I know I would. What is the fix? What can we do to stop this? There's got to be a solution. And parents, they will do whatever. I know that's what I was thinking. Do whatever we can to get it to stop. I do want to show another way that you're promoting awareness. And I think this is definitely the right thing with your skill set. Is you made the movie First Do No Harm.
Hey Mom, on the right short!
She's not ready yet.
I'm ready now!
When we're done lunging her, you can.
You promised Scout's honor!
Oh, wait. We gotta get the beans out of Schwartz before we put you on her. Don't want to have 2 matching shiners, do we? Hey, Mark, I got a world-class assistant truck washer here. Happens to have an opening in his schedule.
All right, Squirt. Hey, stop calling me Squirt.
Mark. Fine. When I finish washing the spot, you rinse it off. But whatever you do, don't do this.
I put it, Mom. Mark squirted me.
Mark, be nice to your brother. Sorry. Here you go, Squirt.
You told me to squirt.
Oh, I'm drenched.
You know I'm just gonna have to get you back double for what you did to me. I'm coming. Robbie, quit screwing around.
That's it.
Robbie? Mom, come quick! Something's wrong with Robbie! Hurry, Mom, hurry! Mom! It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
And that's pretty much way somehow along those lines the way everybody's story starts. You know, it's just one day perfectly normal, and then the nightmare begins. And you captured that very well in that movie. It was my favorite.
When we started promoting the diet, we started to hear, because the diet had been around since the 1920s, we started to hear from lots of people who had been on the diet, been cured by the diet, and gone on with life. And they wrote with their letters, again, before the internet, with their stories. And that is a true story of that family. A mom named Connie Intermity wrote from just outside Chicago. And in 1975, she lived on a farm, and that was the story of her kid and what happened in their adventure finding the ketogenic diet back in 1975. And her story was particularly dramatic because their kid was hospitalized, and she found about the diet and that it was being done at Johns Hopkins, but they wouldn't release him from the hospital to go from Chicago to Baltimore. And so she actually tried to kidnap from the hospital. She got busted, and eventually she got him to Baltimore, and he did the diet. And I still am in touch with the real kid today, and he's almost 60, I think, in the mid-50s. Of course, he's never had another seizure, and he's done remarkably well. But that's First Do No Harm was a true story. And what I found was that although their circumstances were different than ours in many ways, I mean, their medical insurance ran out, so that made it particularly cumbersome for them to have a sick kid, and their house got foreclosed on, and that made it very difficult. But for many of the certainly feelings that we have as parents of sick kids are very much the same. And the sooner we go through that learning curve of we got to start making decisions based on our knowledge, the better.
I guess my question, Jim, is you got Meryl Streep to act in this movie, and I mean, she's about as high up the chain as you can get. I'm just wondering if she had a personal, reason for wanting to do this movie.
Yeah. My older kids went to school with her kids, and she's like, I can't say enough about her in any way. She's the most normal mom, in addition to being a brilliant actress. But she got to, we went to PTA meetings, and she saw what happened to Charlie from a distance, and she kept in touch. And then she was aware when he got sick, and she was aware when he went on the diet and got better. And so she was very much a believer in the efficacy of the diet back then. it was pretty, I mean, I remember making one call and saying, look, I want to do a movie about this. Are you on? And she said, oh, absolutely. You know, send me the script when you got it. So, and she actually did in 1994. Yeah, in 1994, we did a video introduction to the ketogenic diet, and she did the intro for it. I could show it. I didn't send it to you guys.
I have it. I have it.
Yeah, and she does the intro, and you see her. You know, she was very much. She was aware of what it did, and on the video, she tells a story about a little girl who's walking along the beach, and she's throwing starfish back in the ocean. And some guy comes along and says, "What are you doing?" And you can't save all these starfish. And she throws one starfish back in the ocean and says, well, it will make a difference to this one. And that's always been sort of our philosophy. You can make a difference one at a time.
Greg, you've seen the movie?
Oh yeah, very powerful. I mean, you're crying at it. You know, I don't cry a lot, but I did for that one. It was that moving.
It's a hard movie to get through.
And
really.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously rooting for them, you know, and you're rooting against the doctors, and it's like, you know, it kind of makes you mad at all doctors. It's like, well, not all doctors are quite that bad.
No, it's not. It's not. I've seen
and
some.
Jim, to take an experience like you had and to share it with the world, and that's a huge difference you're making. So it's a wonderful thing you're doing there.
Yeah. I hope more people see that movie, and I hope, you know, it's the sort of thing we need to make more movies like that in order for the world to wake up. It takes a lot to change cultures.
Yeah. I don't think life is that complicated. And for me, if you just, I know there are a lot more facts and whatnot out there, but there's some specific truths that are in place. And one of them is, if you wake up and count your blessings and understand that for each blessing, they don't come for free, you owe something in exchange. And then if you look at life that way and see among your blessings, is that you got one of your kids back. I mean, how much can you do to show your gratitude? Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of the Charlie Foundation we're just so grateful to have gotten Charlie back.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the name Charlie Foundation, obviously it's named after your son, but right. My initial reaction was I thought of that movie way back in the 60s, Charlie, you know, was based on the book Flowers for Algernon. And I remember, you know, they gave him some drugs and he got really smart, and then they quit giving him drugs and it wore off. And then he went back to, you know, the way he was. I thought, well, would the ketogenic diet help that guy? Anyway, that was just my thought.
I don't know. I don't know. There are a lot of people, and again, especially if you're going on it here, one of the problems today is that people, it's so out there now, the ketogenic, you know, you can go into a grocery store and find keto products.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're using the diet for a real medical purpose, you can't, you have to pay a lot more attention than buying keto candy bar or something. You really have to, you know, measure protein.
And why is that so critical? What's like, can you give me some examples of where you could go wrong by just getting any old thing?
Well, the whole idea is to get at the right level of ketosis. In other words, bring fat for energy to help your medical problem. So if there are too many carbs that you're eating, you won't get into ketosis. If you go into too rigid a form of the diet, you can go into ketoacidosis, which can be a big problem too. That's why, again, if you're on it for a medical problem, if you're just on it to lose weight and you want to try a keto candy bar, fine. But if you're on it for a real medical purpose, that's why it's so important to be working with a trained dietitian.
How much of that can be self-regulated? Like, can you check your blood sugar and say, you know, this is where I'm at, and or are there more variables than just
and you monitor you can monitor your own ketone bodies.
Okay.
You can either do it now with a finger prick, or back in the day we used to do it. I think they still, by monitoring urine. You can just, you know, put urine, a dipstick in urine, and it turns a certain color. Then your ketones are at the right level. Doing a blood thing is better because you get an accurate reading at the moment. When you test urine, it's delayed because it takes everything a while to get into the urine.
There's some other things they have to measure. Yeah, there's a lot more, Greg. Yeah, to measure. They have to measure the salt, the sodium content, your electrolytes. All of that has to be measured at all times. Your blood sugar levels. I don't know if they did this back when in the 90s, but now, yeah, we had to measure everything. It was a lot of those little, you know, it's little devices goes complete like diabetics have, and you're checking all the different things all day long. Yeah.
Which is why you would have professional help with a dietitian and probably a medical practitioner.
Yes. And again, you got to distinguish between a real medical problem and just you want to lose some weight.
There was a neurosurgeon back in the day, and I'm drawing a blank on his name because I'm going to have somebody from there on here one of these days soon, and he pretty much broke down what a seizure is, and a lot of his research just kind of got buried, and he broke down, in his opinion, and he's an award-winning neurosurgeon too, and the entire medical field has ignored everything he said about this. But what he was saying is basically, and he didn't even speak about the ketogenic diet in those days, but what he would say, based on all of his research that I've read, is that the ketogenic diet is keeping down inflammation in the brain. There's some other brain injury or something is inflamed, and that is causing lack of oxygenated blood to the brain. And the ketogenic diet, so ketones, particularly acetone, which the body produces, is a huge anti-inflammatory. And so I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Absorbine Jr. No?
I've heard of it.
All right, we keep it around at all times. It was my dad kind of raised us on it. So you get bit by a black widow or a spider or something, you put it on, no problem. It goes away. It instantly cuts down the inflammation. And my dad and I'd say, well, what is in there? You know, it's the nastiest smell in the world. And he says that's acetone. And so we always have it on hand, especially living here in Florida, because somebody's always getting bit by something. And I'm wondering if, Jim, in your research, that you've heard anything about the seizures being due to oxygenated blood to the brain, or the benefits of the ketogenic diet being anti-inflammatory for the brain. Has anyone been speaking about this in this regard?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many scientific meetings I've been at. There have been a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I got into this, and I can follow the science right up through at the beginning when they introduce themselves and say where they work.
Okay.
And then it's beyond me. And I literally don't understand what it could be in a foreign language, but I know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I always get kind of excited. But when they get into brain mechanisms and all that kind of stuff, other than the broadest strokes, it's over my head.
Okay. Well, that's fine. What you're doing is necessary. It's necessary because the first time I've ever involved with the seizure with my son, it was whatever the doctor said. I was like, okay, whatever they said, we do. And so we were faithful. We were do whatever they said. And then after a while, kind of starting to get back and going, it's not working. After something doesn't work for so long, and you start to see a few other things, that's when you start, researching a little bit on the side and calling your friends and going, something's not right. I can't put my finger on it. And as you get going a little further, somewhere along the lines, you come across the ketogenic diet, which is what I did. And I hope that, this is, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, part of what really turned it around for us is they recommend brain surgery for Charlie. And we blindly went along with it. And they said it would be a 45-minute procedure. And so like 3 hours into the 45-minute procedure, somebody came up to the waiting room where Nancy and I were waiting to see how things had worked out. And they said, oh, sorry, he was in a lot of pain, so we had to put him on morphine. What? Why was he morphine? Are you crazy? So then an hour or two later, when we got to see him in the recovery room, he was all red and swollen because of his reaction to morphine. He was kind of moaning and groaning, and there's a big, scar in the back of his head. And within about a day, he started having seizures again. And we just blindly.
You think because of the morphine that he started having it again?
Because the surgery had no benefit.
Yeah, the procedure didn't work.
Yeah, procedure didn't work. It was, and now that I've paid, we were blindly just went along with the doctor. And now that I've learned more about it, where they did surgery was in a part of the brain where seizures don't emanate from anyway. Mm-hmm. So the odds of that surgery working were nil. But still we sort of, and that was part of our learning curve. And that was just a hideous experience.
How old was he
and
when
they
he had that
still
surgery?
to this day.
He was 18 months.
18 months.
He was 18
Oh,
months.
wow.
That's most of the age when my son was
How old
going through
was
stuff.
he when the seizures started? You said already, but
Before his first birthday.
just so how long until you finally did the keto diet from when he started?
It was about a year.
Okay.
It was about a year. And in that year, and we really, because I had some connections because I was in the movie business. And so we really got to take Charlie to some real world experts. I mean, we took him to the head of pediatric neurology, not just at UCLA, who's the doctor you saw interviewed, but Seattle Children's, Mass Children's, a couple of them, but the real top-notch people in the field, and none of them mentioned diet to us.
Wow.
Zero.
And can I ask Jeff, how long was it for David?
It was about a year.
About a year?
Yeah, he was on it 18 months, but we were well aware of the ketogenic diet by a year. It takes about that long of research, I guess, so you see everything else is not working and you see the damage is being done. And I don't know, I mean, maybe other people find it faster, but it just seems to be somehow awareness needs to be bigger. And let me just say, for everyone watching this, if anyone makes it to the end, it's charliefoundation.org, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the movie, all right, so here's what I said about the movie is difficult. If I didn't have a son that have gone through it, and I've seen 100 seizures a day, I'd probably say it was hard. But for me, it was refreshing. Somebody else went through this. It was so obvious. And the scene of her carrying him out of the hospital, that was my daily routine, is watching the doors. How am I going to get my kid out of here? So that is actually probably something that everyone has gone through. After you're there for a month and a half of no sleep and seizures, and everyone down the hall are having seizures, you start getting a little stir crazy. You start looking for the door. That movie is extremely refreshing for parents who have gone through it. But what is the biggest thing you could say to parents right now whose kids having seizures and they don't know what to do?
Yeah, so can I just say one thing before that?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that first do no harm paid attention to, and that we try to pay attention to, is the effect of siblings on siblings of sick kids, because it has a really profound effect. I mean, in my family, Charlie has an older brother and sister, and it messed them up a lot, especially his older brother. He and his older brother has since given talks to families, to siblings of kids with epilepsy, and you can almost see the relief in the other sibling's face, because he says, how could I hate someone I love for having a disease he can't control? And I think lots of siblings feel that way. And they try to shield their feelings from the parents because they know the parents have their hands full with the sick kid and they don't really have anybody to talk to about their most severe feelings. And that's a great.
Well, I do have it.
Under recognized.
I do have it. Let's include that.
One of the things that angered me most about my brother's epilepsy was that it ruined how I wanted things to be. Directions would be altered, plans would change, conversations would end abruptly, foods were banned from the dinner table, and my feelings would be hurt, and I would get angry. My family and I took a trip to Florida once, and in the midst of my enjoyment and bliss, Charlie, who'd been seizure-free for a few months, had a relapse. A grand mal seizure rolled his eyes back like the pictures on a slot machine, engulfing my little brother and leaving him shaking stiff as a board. A high-pitched squeal released from a body so innocent and sweet that it seemed impossible to produce such a faith-crushing noise. That sound sent my parents in shock, my sister into tears, and me into a hurricane of resentment, fear, anger, and hatred. Why did he have to have these things at the most inopportune time? Why did everybody drop everything and go attend to him? Why did he ruin happy situations? Why did the room go dead and stale, everybody unable to make eye contact with each other? Why did everything get so quiet? Why did I hate someone I love for having a disease he cannot control? So many fears, questions, and doubts still circulate through my head concerning my little brother, Charlie. He is 18 years old, had his first seizure when he was 1, and has his last when he was 5 after being cured by the ketogenic diet. I love my little brother very much and want to be part of his life, and sometimes I'm not sure how to approach the situation. I have worked on our relationship through therapy and other forms of help, and I'm working on spending more time with Charlie himself. I can be tentative around him, tiptoeing at times, wondering how to engage, when to leave him alone, which I sometimes do too often, and when to force him out the door with me. My actions surrounding Charlie's epilepsy have always been a challenge for me, dating back to when Charlie first started having seizures. When there seemed no way of ceasing Charlie's seizures, I was afraid to bring kids home from school for fear that Charlie would have a seizure in front of them. I went further and further inside, distancing myself from others in an attempt to protect from further hurt. The defense mechanisms I utilized into my teen years increased my introverted behavior and further complicated the emotions surrounding Charlie's epilepsy. Having a sibling with epilepsy was something I was incapable of processing in a healthy way without the help of others. I hated the fact that he stole the spotlight. I disliked that every family conversation concentrated on his disease, and I didn't want to stir the already fragile nest that was my family by inserting my own issues regarding the situation, along with whatever other frailties I had as a growing teenager. Feelings of jealousy and anger were a constant, and it is fair to say that there were, and still are, times when I lose patience and ignore my little brother's existence. Ours is a relationship of frustration, hurt, envy, misinterpretation, confusion, and most of all, an underlying love that has begun to, over time, prevail more and more. I know there is much that we can share, and it is only a matter of time before we access it and let it pour out onto a greater level. I have little doubt our growth will come with its fair share of difficulties and a continued effort from both sides. Through Charlie, I have learned a lot. For years, I have watched him emanate love and compassion to all who are lucky enough to have him present in their life. It is clear that he needs me just as much as I need him. We are brothers who share a challenging history together, which has cultivated a love that will forever allow us to teach and learn from one another. I'm grateful he is in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
very potent.
Extremely powerful.
Profound introspect.
Yeah, and I think his feelings are typical of most siblings.
Yeah, I showed that to my son, my oldest son, and when he was 5 or 6, when he was going through it, and he just looked at it, and I said, "What do you think?" And he's like, "That's about right." I asked him the other day. I had him watch it again. Now he's 15, and he's like, "About 30%." But it's really, for a young kid, Yeah, for older brother, you have no idea, especially if it was the only child first, like my oldest son.
Right.
Had no idea what was going on. His life was turned upside down. His whole sense of reality, it was traumatic. I mean, he must have blocked out a lot of it. He doesn't remember, but I mean, he must have blocked out a lot of it for a 5-year-old to go through that with his brother. So thank you for your son. He looked like a great guy too. How's he doing?
He's
your
great.
oldest. Yeah.
Now it's kind of interesting. He has a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And when they were a little younger, he imagined what it would have been like if either of his kids had gotten sick. And I think he had a much deeper appreciation for what our family went through when his little brother was sick.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't know what it's like to be a parent until you are one in all ways.
Exactly. This has been a real treat, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank
your
you,
time.
guys.
And
people right now, how can they help the Charlie Foundation? What can they do?
Well, it's always wonderful to hear other people's stories. We do, we are a not-for-profit, and so, we're supported, and we've never taken a nickel of help from any for-profit organization. So we live on donations, and so they're helpful, and you can do that through our website if you feel like it. And the other thing is just, take a look and see what on there, this whole notion of controlling our own medical destiny is important. And I've certainly, should I tell one other quick story?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So 10 years in 2001, I was diagnosed with leukemia, acute myelogenous leukemia, and I was given a 50% chance of living 2 years. And the first doctor I went to reminded me of Charlie's doctor from UCLA. He was like too busy to answer questions and whatnot. And so really based on Charlie's decision, I started searching around for other places to go to treat the leukemia and get what wound up curing me was a stem cell transplant from my sister. But it was really the lessons learned from our experience with Charlie that got me to start thinking a little bit outside the box and not just trusting the first guy who came along.
good for you. We're glad you did. We're glad you're
Excellent
here.
advice.
How long ago was that again?
That was 2000. Well, I got the transplant in 2003. I think I was diagnosed 2001 or something like that, 2002.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. We got to do a whole nother video on that alone.
Oh yeah.